They say that the darkest shadows are often cast by the brightest lights. For Richard Sterling, a man who could buy entire companies with a single signature, the most expensive thing he owned was the silence in his own home, a silence he mistook for peace. Until the day it screamed at him. It was a freezing December evening in Connecticut when the silver SUV pulled into the driveway of the Sterling estate. The mansion stood like a fortress of solitude, its windows glowing with a deceptive warmth against the snow. Richard sat in the car for a moment, gripping the leather steering wheel. He was exhausted. In his bespoke cream-colored suit, he looked every bit the master of his universe. Yet a heavy feeling pressed on his chest, an intuition he had ignored for far too long. He looked up at the second-floor window. The light was on in Lily's room. Why is she still awake? He wondered. He entered the house, the sound of his Italian leather shoes echoing sharply against the polished marble floors. The house was immaculate. Too immaculate. It smelled of pine and expensive cleaning products, but not of home. Marcella. He called out, loosening his tie. No answer. Just a sudden, sharp crash of porcelain shattering from the kitchen. Richard froze. His heart skipped a beat, not out of anger, but out of a sudden, inexplicable fear. He walked towards the kitchen, and the scene he stumbled upon would haunt him forever. There stood Marcella, stunning in a tight, bright red dress that hugged her figure, looming over a small, trembling figure. Lily, his 8-year-old daughter, was on her knees. She was wearing her favorite bright Saxe blue outfit, now stained dark with water. Her braided hair hung low as she desperately tried to gather sharp shards of white ceramic with her bare, shaking hands. "Don't cut yourself." "Darling," Marcella whispered, her voice smooth as silk but cold as ice. "We wouldn't want to ruin the carpet, would we?" The look in Lily's eyes when she saw her father wasn't relief. It was pure terror. By the way, before we dive deeper into this mystery, I'm curious, where are you watching this story from tonight? If you've ever felt a gut instinct warning you that something wasn't right, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story while you subscribe to follow Richard's journey. Richard took a step forward, the air in the room thickening. He didn't know it yet, but the perfect picture of his life had just developed its first crack. And through that crack, he was about to see a monster. The kitchen was suffocatingly warm, a stark contrast to the blizzard raging outside the massive windows. Richard stood frozen, his eyes darting between the shattered porcelain on the floor and his wife. Marcella smoothed the fabric of her bright red dress, her face composing itself into a mask of concerned maternal disappointment so quickly it was almost terrifying. "Richard, you startled us," she said, her voice dropping to a purr. She stepped over the mess, her high heels clicking ominously near Lily's fingers. Lily was just being clumsy again. "I told her the ceramic was heavy, but you know how she gets." Distracted. Lily didn't speak. She didn't even look up. In her Saxe blue outfit, she looked like a small bruised flower amidst the sterile white marble. She just kept picking up the shards, a tiny cut on her thumb welling with a drop of blood. Richard's stomach churned. He walked over and knelt beside his daughter, ignoring the creak of his cream-colored suit trousers. "Lily, leave it," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "It's just a cup." "You're bleeding." "I have to clean it, Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "If I don't, the stain won't go away." "Nonsense," Richard said, reaching out to take a sharp shard from her hand. But the moment his skin brushed hers, she flinched a sharp, violent jerk as if she had been burned. The room went deadly silent. Marcella let out a short, sharp laugh. "Oh, stop it, Richard. You're making her nervous. She knows the rules. Discipline builds character. Go wash up, darling. I'll have the maid finish this." Lily scrambled up, clutching her hand to her chest, and bolted from the room without making eye contact. Richard watched her go, a cold dread settling in his bones. He turned to Marcella, who was now calmly checking her reflection in the oven glass. "She's afraid." "Marcella," Richard said, standing up. "She's respectful," Marcella corrected, turning to him with a dazzling smile that didn't reach her eyes. "There's a difference," Now come. Dinner is getting cold and you look exhausted. Speaking of family dynamics, I'm wondering, have you ever sensed that someone was hiding their true feelings just to keep the peace at home? It's heartbreaking when silence speaks louder than words. If you've ever been the one trying to keep everything together, leave it in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in feeling this. Dinner was an exercise in torture. The dining room was vast, the table set with enough silverware to serve a king, yet only 3 people sat there. The clinking of forks against china sounded like gunshots in the quiet room. Richard watched Lily across the table. She was picking at her food-dried potatoes and a piece of meat that looked overcooked compared to his, and Marcella's perfectly glazed steak. She cut tiny pieces, chewing slowly, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth. How was school? Richard asked, trying to bridge the gap. Lily opened her mouth, but before a sound came out, Marcella cleared her throat. Just a soft sound. Lily's mouth snapped shut. She looked down. She's struggling, Richard, Marcella answered for her, pouring herself a glass of deep red wine that matched her dress. Miss Diaz and I discussed it today. Her focus is drifting. She's disruptive. Honestly, I think she does it for attention. Is that true, Lily? Richard asked gently. Lily nodded mechanically. Yes, Daddy, I'm sorry. Richard looked at his daughter's wrist. Her Saks blue long-sleeved shirt was pulled down tight, covering her hands almost to the knuckles. It was warm inside the house, yet she was wrapped up as if she were freezing. Are you cold, honey? He reached out to touch her arm. I'm fine. Lily pulled her arm back quickly, knocking over her water glass. The liquid spread across the pristine white tablecloth like a dark omen. Lily gasped, her face draining of color. She looked at Marcella with sheer panic. Marcella didn't yell. She didn't slam the table. She simply placed her fork down, very slowly, and stared at the stain. Clumsy, she whispered. Again. It's just water, Richard said, grabbing a napkin. I'll get it. No, Marcella said, her voice sharp. She needs to learn responsibility. Lily, go to your room. We'll discuss this later. But she hasn't eaten, Richard protested. She's fed on her own incompetence tonight, Marcella said, standing up and smoothing her red dress. Trust me, Richard. I'm a teacher. I know how to handle difficult children. You're too soft. That's why she's like this. Richard watched helplessly as his daughter slid off the chair, head hung low, and walked out of the room like a prisoner returning to her cell. He felt a surge of anger, but it was choked by confusion. Marcella was the expert. She was the one everyone loved. Was he really just being paranoid? Before we continue to the darker part of the night, I have a question for you parents out there. Have you ever felt torn between protecting your child and trusting a partner's discipline? It's such a hard place to be. Rate Richard's reaction from 1 to 10 in the comments. Was he too passive or just confused? The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight. The house was silent, but Richard couldn't sleep. He sat in his study, the glow of his laptop illuminating his tired face. He had tried to work, but the image of Lily's trembling hands kept invading his spreadsheets. He needed water. He walked out into the hallway, his socks silent on the plush carpet. As he passed Lily's room, he paused. The door was shut tight. He pressed his ear against the wood. Silence. He continued downstairs. The living room was bathed in moonlight. As he walked toward the kitchen, his foot kicked something under the sofa. He frowned and bent down. It was a small, battered notebook. Blue cover. Richard picked it up. It was Lily's. He remembered buying it for her at the start of the school year. He opened it, expecting to see spelling practice or math problems. What he saw made his blood run cold. The first page was a drawing. Stick figures. A tall figure with yellow hair and a red dress, holding something black. A small figure in blue. Crying. He turned the page. More drawings. A table. Spilled water. A dark room. He turned to the last entry. It wasn't a drawing. It was a sentence, written in shaky, childish handwriting. pressed so hard the pencil had nearly torn the paper. If I am not perfect, the water comes back. I miss Mommy. Richard collapsed onto the sofa, clutching the notebook. His breath hitched. This wasn't acting out. This wasn't lack of focus. This was a cry for help. He looked up at the ceiling, towards the second floor where Marcella slept. The woman he had married. The woman who charmed everyone at the country club. The woman who wore red like a banner of confidence. Was she a monster? He needed proof. Drawings weren't enough. He knew how Marcella operated. She could spin this as a child's overactive imagination. He needed something undeniable. He stood up, a new energy coursing through him. He went to the utility closet and dug out his old GoPro camera, small and discreet. He walked into the kitchen. He found a spot on top of the high cabinets, nestled between a decorative plant and the wall. It had a perfect view of the kitchen island and the floor where the accidents always seemed to happen. He set it to record on motion. "I've got you," he whispered to the empty room. "I promise, Lily, I've got you." This moment changes everything. Finding a clue that confirms your worst fears is terrifying. If you were Richard, would you confront Marcella right now with the notebook, or would you wait to get more video evidence? Tell me your strategy in the comments. I read every single one. Morning arrived with a deceptive brightness. The sun streamed into the kitchen, smelling of fresh coffee and toast. Marcella was already up, looking impeccable in a silk blouse, packing Lily's lunch. "Good morning, darling," she chirped as Richard entered. She kissed his cheek. Her lips were cold. Lily sat at the small kitchen island, eating oatmeal. She was dressed for school in her uniform, but over it, she wore that same bright Saks blue cardigan, buttoned all the way to her chin. "Morning," Richard said, his voice tight. He looked at the camera hidden in the plant. A tiny red light blinked once, recording. "Eat up, Lily," Marcella said, checking her watch. "We can't be late. I have a meeting with the principal about the Christmas fund." "I'm not hungry," Lily murmured. "You'll eat," Marcella said. It wasn't a request. She stepped closer to Lily, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. Richard watched closely. He saw Marcella's thumb dig into the soft flesh of Lily's shoulder. It looked like a gentle touch to an outsider, but he saw Lily's eyes widen in pain. She quickly shoveled a spoonful of oatmeal into her mouth. "I'll drive her today," Richard announced suddenly. Marcella froze. She turned slowly. "You? But you have that merger meeting." "I moved it," Richard lied. "I want to spend time with my daughter." Marcella's eyes narrowed. For a second, the mask slipped, revealing a flash of pure annoyance. Then the smile returned. "That's sweet, Richard. But it disrupts her routine. You know she needs structure." "One ride won't hurt," Richard said, grabbing his keys. "Come on, Lily." Lily looked at Marcella, terrified to move. Marcella held her gaze for a long second, then nodded. "Go on then. Don't be a burden to your father." As they walked to the car, Richard noticed Lily was limping slightly. He opened the door of his silver sedan for her. She climbed in, clutching her backpack like a shield. The drive to Cedar Elementary was silent. Richard looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror. She was staring out the window, her small hand gripping the door handle until her knuckles turned white. "Lily," Richard said softly. "Is everything okay with Marcella? You can tell me." Lily stiffened. She looked at his eyes in the mirror, then quickly looked away. She's teaching me to be good, Daddy. I just have to be good." The way she said it rehearsed. Robotic broke his heart more than tears would have done. It's so hard to get a child to open up when they are scared. What would you say to Lily in this car ride to make her feel safe enough to talk? Your advice might help someone reading this who is going through a similar situation. Drop your thoughts below. Cedar Elementary looked like a postcard. Red brick, white trim, a playground filled with laughing children. It was the best school in the district, and Marcella was its star teacher. As Richard pulled up, he saw Marcella's car already there. She must have taken the shortcut. She was standing by the entrance, greeting parents. She looked radiant. Parents were stopping to chat, laughing at her jokes, handing her coffee. She was the queen bee. Richard walked Lily to the gate. As they approached, Marcella spotted them. Her face lit up with that practiced warmth. "There they are!" She called out, loud enough for the other parents to hear. "Richard, you're such a doting father." She swooped in, placing a hand on Lily's back. "Go on, sweetie. Class started 5 minutes ago. Run along." Lily flinched at the touch but hurried inside, her head down, weaving through the crowd like a ghost. "She's so lucky to have you, Marcella," a mother standing nearby gushed. "Taking on a stepchild is hard work." "Oh, it's a labor of love," Marcella sighed, putting a hand on her chest. "She has some behavioral challenges. Trauma from her mother's passing, we think. But we're working through it." Richard stood there, listening to the lie being spun so effortlessly. He felt like he was in a play where everyone knew the lines except him. "I need to get to work," Richard said abruptly, unable to stomach the scene any longer. "Have a great day, honey," Marcella said, blowing him a kiss. As Richard walked back to his car, he didn't leave. He waited. He watched from the parking lot as the parents dispersed. He saw Marcella turn to walk inside. Her smile vanished instantly. Her posture shifted from welcoming to rigid. She looked at a student running in the hall and snapped something that made the boy freeze. Richard took out his phone and made a note. Step 1. Get the school records. He drove to his office. But his mind was back in that classroom. He arrived at his high-rise building, greeted his secretary, and sat at his desk. "Mr. Sterling," his secretary buzzed in. An urgent email from the school. From Mrs. Sterling. Richard opened it. Subject: Urgent support for Lily's behavioral therapy. My dearest Richard, I hate to ask, but the school counselor recommends an intensive program for Lily. She had an incident today. She destroyed another student's art project. We need to pay for the damages in the therapy sessions. It's $5,000. I know it's a lot, but for her future. Love. Destroyed an art project, Lily. The girl who treated a broken cup like a tragedy? Richard stared at the screen. He clicked reply, but instead of typing, he picked up his phone. "Get me the bank," he said, his voice cold and hard. "I want a full audit of the school donation account now. The web of lies is starting to unravel. Asking for money for a fake incident is a classic manipulation tactic. Have you ever caught someone in a financial lie? How did you handle it? Hit that like button if you're rooting for Richard to take them down." The next afternoon, Richard stood in the reception area of Cedar Elementary. He wasn't there as a parent today. He was there as a businessman. He wore his signature cream-colored suit, projecting an aura of power and wealth that made the school secretary nervous. "I'm looking to upgrade the school's security system," Richard lied smoothly. "A personal donation. But I need to review the current student safety logs and incident reports to see where the vulnerabilities are." The secretary, flustered by the presence of the school's biggest donor, didn't hesitate. "Of course, Mr. Sterling. Mrs. Sterling is in class, and Principal Diaz is at lunch, but I can print those out for you right now." She handed him a thick folder. Richard took it to his car. He flipped through the pages. His heart hammered against his ribs. He found Lily's file. Absent, October 12, 15. Reason: illness, reported by mother. He checked his own calendar. Those were dates he was out of town. Lily hadn't been sick. He turned to the behavioral incidents section. It was blank dot. There were no reports of destroyed art projects. No reports of fighting. No reports of disruption. The email asking for $5,000 for damages was a complete fabrication. Richard slammed the steering wheel. It wasn't just abuse. It was fraud. They were using his daughter as a cash cow. He felt a wave of nausea. How long had this been going on? How many therapy sessions had he paid for that never happened? This is a classic gaslighting move, isolating the victim and lying about their behavior to justify control. Have you ever discovered that someone was lying about you to others just to cover their own tracks? It makes my blood boil. If you despise liars, type truth in the comments. That night, the house was quiet again. Marcella was asleep. Richard sat in his study, the small SD card from the hidden kitchen camera in his hand. It felt heavy, like it contained lead. He inserted it into his laptop. The screen flickered to life. Grainy, wide-angle footage of their kitchen. Timestamp, 10:15 p.m. Marcella walked into the frame. She wasn't wearing her public mask. Her face was slack, cold. She wore a silk robe. She walked to the cupboard, took a glass of water, and deliberately poured a small amount onto the floor. Then she yelled, "Lily! Get down here!" Richard watched, horror-struck, as his tiny daughter appeared in her pajamas. She looked exhausted. "You missed a spot from yesterday," Marcella said, pointing to the puddle she had just created. "Clean it, now." Lily dropped to her knees immediately. No argument. No tears. Just a terrifying, robotic obedience. She scrubbed the spot. "Harder," Marcella commanded. She stepped closer. Then, she did something that made Richard stop breathing. She placed her hand on the back of Lily's head and pushed down. Not violently enough to leave a bruise, but with enough dominance to force Lily's face inches from the wet floor. "Know your place, you little brat," Marcella hissed. "If you tell your father, he won't believe you. He thinks you're crazy. He thinks you're broken. That's why he's never home." Lily sobbed silently, her small body shaking. Richard paused the video. He couldn't watch anymore. He put his head in his hands and wept. He wept for every time he had ignored a sign. He wept for every time he had let Marcella handle it. He wept because his money, his success, his big house meant nothing. He had failed the one person who mattered. I have to pause here because this is heavy. We often think abuse is always loud screaming and hitting. But sometimes, it's this quiet psychological destruction. It's making a child believe their own parent doesn't love them. If you could jump into the screen and say one thing to Richard right now, what would it be? The tears didn't last long. They were replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Richard wiped his face. He saved the video. He made 3 copies. One on his hard drive, one in the cloud, one on a USB stick. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. It was 2 a.m., but he didn't care. "Robert," he said when his lawyer answered, sleep heavy. "Wake up. I need you. I have evidence of child abuse and fraud. I want full custody, I want a restraining order, and I want them to pay. But..." Richard looked at the screen where Marcella's frozen face sneered at his daughter. "I don't want to just fire them, Robert. I want to destroy them. Publicly, irreversibly." "Richard, calm down," the lawyer said. "What's the plan?" "The Christmas party," Richard said, his voice deadly calm. "It's in 2 days. At the school. Marcella, Principal Diaz, the school board. Everyone will be there. They want a show? I'll give them a show." "That's risky," Robert warned. "It's justice," Richard replied. "Prepare the papers. Have the police on standby. I'm going to play the loving husband for exactly 48 more hours. And then, I'm going to burn their world down. Revenge is a dish best served publicly. Richard is planning to expose them in front of everyone they tried to impress." "Do you think this is the right move, or should you just go to the police quietly?" "Personally, I think they deserve every bit of public shame coming their way. Vote public or private in the comments." The next 2 days were a masterclass in acting. Richard went to work. He came home. He complimented Marcella's dress. He smiled at dinner. But every time he looked at Lily, he signaled her with his eyes. "Hold on. Just a little longer." On the morning of the Christmas party, Marcella was manic. She was running around the house, shouting orders at the maids. "This has to be perfect," she yelled. "The superintendent is coming." "Richard, wear your best tie." She turned to Lily. "And you?" She looked at the Saks blue dress Lily was holding. Don't embarrass me. Sit in the back. Don't speak unless spoken to. If you spill a single drop of juice, you'll wish you were never born. Lily shrank back. Richard stepped in, adjusting his cufflinks. She be fine, Marcella. She looks beautiful. Marcella rolled her eyes. She looks like a charity case. But whatever. Let's go. As they walked out the door, Richard grabbed his coat. In the pocket, he felt the cool metal of the USB drive. He looked at the house one last time. He knew that when he returned, Marcella wouldn't be with them. The silence was about to end. The tension is unbearable. We are heading to the Christmas party, the climax of our story. This is where the tacla a terma, the twist, happens. Are you ready to see the mask fall off? Make sure you're subscribed because the next part is going to be explosive. The gymnasium of Cedar Elementary had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Silver streamers hung from the rafters, fake snow covered the floor, and a massive Christmas tree stood in the center, adorned with crystal ornaments. It was a display of wealth and perfection, exactly the image Principal Diaz and Marcella wanted to project. Richard walked in, Lily's small hand clutching his. He could feel her trembling. She was wearing her Saks blue dress, but she looked like a ghost haunting her own life. Marcella, on the other hand, was the star of the show. Her bright red dress slashed through the room like a wound. She moved from group to group, laughing, touching arms, accepting compliments. Richard! Over here! Principal Diaz waved. She was a sharp woman in a gray suit, her smile tight and practiced. We were just talking about the special behavioral fund you so generously supported. It's doing wonders for the school. Richard smiled. It was a cold, predatory smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm glad to hear that, Principal Diaz. In fact, I'm so impressed I prepared a special presentation for tonight. To show everyone exactly where that money is going. Diaz's eyes lit up with greed. Oh, wonderful! A surprise donation? A surprise, yes, Richard said smoothly. Let's call it that. He looked down at Lily. Stay close to me, honey. Just for 10 more minutes. Then we go home. Forever. Lily looked up, confused by his tone, but she squeezed his hand tighter. We've all been in rooms full of fake smiles and hidden agendas. It's suffocating, isn't it? If you could read people's minds at parties like this, do you think you'd be shocked by what you hear? Let me know in the comments if you prefer honest enemies over fake friends. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Principal Diaz walked up to the microphone, the feedback whining slightly before she began. Welcome, parents, to our annual Christmas Gala. Tonight, we celebrate excellence. And no one embodies excellence more than our very own head of the Parent-Teacher Association, Marcella Sterling. Applause erupted. Marcella glided onto the stage, blowing kisses. She took the mic, her voice dripping with false humility. Thank you, thank you. I do it all for the children. And for my darling stepdaughter Lily, who has taught me so much about patience. The crowd chuckled politely. Richard felt bile rise in his throat. And now, Diaz announced, Mr. Richard Sterling has a special video presentation for us. He's been documenting our school's progress. Richard stepped onto the stage. He didn't take the mic from Marcella. He took the remote control for the giant projector screen behind them. Thank you, Marcella, Richard said, his voice booming without the mic, cutting through the silence. You're right. You have taught Lily a lot. And tonight, I want everyone to see exactly what you've been teaching her. He pressed play. My heart is pounding. This is the moment of no return. Richard is about to drop the bomb. On a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfying is it to see a bully about to get caught? I'm at an 11 right now. The giant screen flickered to life. The audience expected a montage of happy children singing carols or teachers smiling. Instead, they saw a grainy, black and white image of a kitchen at night. A collective gasp rippled through the room. On the screen, Marcella's voice boomed out, distorted but unmistakable. Clean it, now. The footage showed Lily, small and fragile in her pajamas, scrubbing the floor. Harder. Then, the moment that froze the room, Marcella's hand shoving Lily's head down towards the wet tiles. The look of pure malice on her face was magnified 10 feet tall for everyone to see. Marcella stood on stage, paralyzed. Her face went pale, the red dress now looking like a costume from a horror movie. She reached for the remote in Richard's hand. Turn it off. It's out of context. It's a game. Richard easily blocked her, stepping to the microphone. A game? He asked, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. Is it a game when you force an 8-year-old to eat on the floor? Is it a game when you lie to me about her being sick so you can lock her in her room? The video changed. Now it showed the emails. The fake reports. The bank transfers. From Marcella Sterling to Principal Diaz subject. Fake the report. I need more money for the fund. A shriek came from the side of the stage. Principal Diaz tried to run towards the exit, but 2 police officers, whom Richard had called an hour ago, were already blocking the doors. The room erupted into chaos. Parents were standing up, shouting. Some were covering their children's eyes. Others were filming with their phones. This is what I call absolute justice. No hiding, no spinning the story. The truth is out there for everyone to see. Do you think public shaming is a fair punishment for abusers, or is it too harsh? I think for what she did, it's not enough. Tell me your verdict, guilty or not guilty. Marcella looked at the crowd. The admiration she fed on was gone. It was replaced by disgust. She looked at Richard. Richard, please, she begged, tears streaming down her face, tears of fear, not remorse. I was stressed. She's difficult. You don't know what it's like. Richard looked at her with zero emotion. You're right. I didn't know. But I know now. He turned his back on her. He walked off the stage, down the steps, straight to where Lily was sitting alone in the front row. The crowd parted for him. He knelt in front of his daughter. The chaos of the room, the shouting, the police handcuffing Principal Diaz, Marcella screaming as she was read her rights faded into the background. Did you see Lily? Richard whispered, taking her trembling hands in his. The monster is gone. She can't hurt you. I promise. She will never ever hurt you again. Lily looked at the stage where the police were escorting Marcella away. The woman in red, who had seemed like a giant for so long, looked small and pathetic in handcuffs. Lily looked back at her father. Her eyes filled with tears, but for the first time they weren't tears of fear. She threw her arms around his neck and buried her face in his cream-colored suit. Daddy, she sobbed. Let's go home. Yes, Richard said, picking her up in his arms. Let's go home. He carried her out of the gymnasium, leaving the ruins of his fake life behind, walking towards the cold night air which suddenly felt incredibly fresh. The relief. I'm literally tearing up. That moment when the victim realizes they are finally safe is everything. If this reunion touched your heart, share this story with someone who needs a reminder that good can win. And don't go anywhere, because the aftermath is where the real healing begins. The drive away from Cedar Elementary was unlike any journey Richard had ever taken. The silence inside the silver SUV was not the empty, heavy silence of the past few months. It was a fragile, vibrating silence, like the air after a thunderstorm. Richard gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white against the dark leather. His heart was still hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs, adrenaline flooding his system. He kept glancing at the rearview mirror. Lily was sitting in the back, exactly where she always sat. But she wasn't looking out the window. She was clutching her teddy bear, a worn, brown thing with one button eye missing, so tightly that her small fingers were buried in its fur. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the back of his seat, unblinking. She wasn't crying. That worried him more than anything. Lily? Richard whispered, his voice cracking. The sound seemed too loud in the confined space. She didn't answer immediately. She took a slow, shaky breath. Is she really gone, Daddy? Richard pulled the car over to the side of the road, under the orange glow of a street lamp. Snow was beginning to fall again, soft flakes melting on the windshield. He turned around, reaching his hand into the back seat. She's gone, baby. The police have her. Principal Diaz too. They can never come back to our house. Never. Lily looked at his hand, then slowly, hesitantly, reached out and touched his fingers. Her skin was ice cold. But her clothes are still there, she whispered, a terrifying logic in her voice. Her smell is there. Richard felt a fresh wave of nausea. She was right. The house, that massive, multi-million-dollar mansion he had been so proud of, was not a home. It was a crime scene. It was a museum of her pain. Then we won't stay there, Richard declared, a sudden clarity washing over him. We'll pack what we need. Just the good things. And we'll leave. Tonight. Leaving a toxic environment is the first step to healing, but it's also the scariest. Have you ever had to leave a place because it held too many bad memories? It takes immense courage to walk away from everything you know. If you've ever started over from scratch, tell me, was it worth it? I believe it always is. Before they could go home, there was the inevitable bureaucracy of justice. The police station was a stark, fluorescent-lit building that smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. They sat in a small interview room. A kind female officer, Officer Miller, sat opposite them. She didn't wear a uniform. She wore a soft gray sweater, likely to make Lily feel less intimidated. Lily, Officer Miller said softly, pushing a cup of hot cocoa across the table. You're very brave. Your dad showed us the video. You don't have to watch it again. I just need you to tell me. Was there anything else? Anything she said to you? Richard sat next to Lily, his arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. He could feel the tension in her small frame. Lily took a sip of the cocoa. She looked at the steam rising from the cup. She said. Lily's voice trembled. She said Daddy didn't love me. She said I was broken, and that's why Mommy died. Because I was bad luck. Richard let out a sound that was half sob, half growl. He buried his face in his hands. The cruelty was so precise, so calculated. Marcella hadn't just hurt her body. She had tried to murder her soul. Officer Miller's eyes hardened, her pen scratching furiously on the notepad. That is not true, Lily. That is a lie bad people tell to control you. Do you understand? Lily nodded, but her eyes remained distant. And she made me sleep in the closet once. When I spilled the juice on the rug. She said darkness is good for quiet girls. Richard stood up, pacing the small room. He wanted to tear the walls down. He wanted to go to the holding cell and scream at Marcella until his voice gave out. But he knew that wouldn't help Lily. We have enough, Officer Miller said, closing the file. Her face was grim. With the video, the financial fraud, and this statement, she's looking at significant prison time. Child endangerment, emotional abuse, grand larceny. She won't be hurting anyone for a very, very long time. As they walked out of the station, the cold night air hit them. It was 3 a.m. Are you hungry? Richard asked. Lily shook her head. I just want to sleep. But not in my room. We're going to a hotel tonight, Richard decided. He couldn't take her back to that house. Not yet. They checked into a suite at the nearest luxury hotel. It was impersonal, beige and safe. Richard sat in the armchair all night, watching Lily sleep in the king-sized bed. Every time she whimpered or turned, he flinched, ready to comfort her. He didn't sleep a wink. He spent the night researching. Real estate in the north. Quiet towns. Lake houses. Therapy for child trauma. He was no longer a CEO. He was a father on a mission. 2 days later, they returned to the mansion for the last time. The goal was simple: pack and purge. The house looked different now. The perfectly manicured lawn, the grand pillars, the imposing front door, it all looked like a film set for a movie he no longer wanted to watch. They entered. The silence was absolute. Marcella's presence was gone, but her ghost lingered in the decor. The vase she loved. The painting she chose. The spot on the floor where she forced Lily to kneel. Okay, Lily, Richard said, trying to sound upbeat. Here's the rule. We only take what makes us smile. Anything that makes you feel sad or scared or even just meh, it stays. We buy new things. Better things. Lily stood in the hallway, looking at the stairs. Can I take my bear? Yes. Can I take my drawing book? Absolutely. Can I take my blue dress? Richard looked at the Saks blue dress she wore so often. He remembered seeing her in the video, wearing that dress while she scrubbed the floor. Do you like that dress, Lily? She hesitated. Marcella picked it out. She said blue is a cold color. Like me. Richard knelt down. Lily, you are not cold. You are warm and bright and full of life. We leave the dress. We will buy you a dress in every color of the rainbow. Red, yellow, green, purple. But we leave the cold blue here. Lily nodded, a small weight lifting from her shoulders. Okay. Leave it. They moved through the house like scavengers. Richard packed his documents, his photos of his first wife, Lily's mother, and a few comfortable clothes. He left the cream suits. He left the expensive watches Marcella had bought him. When they got to Lily's room, it was the hardest part. The room was sparse. Unloved. Lily went under her bed and pulled out a shoebox. What's that? Richard asked. My treasure box, she whispered. She opened it. Inside were wrapper papers from candies, a dried flower, and a photo of Richard torn from a magazine. I kept this, she said, pointing to his photo. So I wouldn't forget what you looked like when you were happy. Richard felt tears prick his eyes again. He choked them back. He had to be strong. Well, you don't need the photo anymore. You have the real thing. I'm not going anywhere. He helped her pack the box into a new suitcase. As they were leaving, Richard walked into the kitchen one last time. He saw the spot on the floor. The marble seemed to glare at him. He took a marker from his pocket, a thick, black, permanent marker. He knelt down and wrote on the pristine marble floor. Never again. It was petty. It was vandalism of his own property. But it felt incredibly satisfying. Before we continue, please take a moment to leave a comment about this story and rate it from 1 to 10. How are you feeling? If there's anything you'd like to share, I'm always here to listen. I hope you find a moment of peace and reflection as you follow this healing story and its journey of courage and justice. The moving truck had already left with the furniture Richard decided to keep mostly from his old office and Lily's nursery days. They were in the car, ready to go. Richard locked the front door. He held the heavy brass key in his hand. It felt like a shackle. He walked to the large flower pot by the entrance, Marcella's favorite hydrangeas, and dropped the key into the dirt. He didn't want to hand it over. He wanted to bury it. He got into the car. Lily was in the front seat this time. She had requested it. I want to see where we are going, she had said. Ready for an adventure? Richard asked, starting the engine. Where are we going, Daddy? North, Richard said. To a place with a big lake. And trees. And no gates. Are there schools there? Yes, but nice ones. With teachers who let you paint the sky whatever color you want. The car rolled down the driveway. Richard didn't look back in the rearview mirror. He kept his eyes on the road ahead. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple colors that felt warm, unlike the cold gray of the estate they were leaving behind. The drive was long. Hours turned into silence, but it was a comfortable silence. Lily fell asleep against the window, her breath fogging up the glass. Richard drove through the night. He watched the landscape change from suburban sprawl to dense forests and winding roads. He felt the city shedding off him like a snake shedding its skin. Around midnight, they crossed the state line. The GPS announced, "Welcome to Vermont." We made it, Richard whispered to the sleeping girl. He pulled into a small motel for the night, not wanting to wake her to find their new house in the dark. He carried her into the room, tucking her in. He sat by the window, watching the moon reflect off the snow. For the first time in years, his mind wasn't racing with stock prices or merger deals. It was quiet, But silence brings its own demons. Now that the adrenaline was gone, the guilt settled in. How did I miss it? The question replayed in his mind like a broken record. I was in the same house. I ate at the same table. And I didn't see she was drowning. He looked at his hands. They were the hands of a man who built empires but failed to build a home. I will fix this, he vowed to the moon. I will spend the rest of my life making it up to her. Guilt is a heavy backpack to carry, especially for a parent. Richard is beating himself up, which is natural. Do you think he can ever truly forgive himself? Or is forgiveness not the point? Is it about action? If you've ever had to forgive yourself for missing the signs, share your wisdom below. We could all use it. The next morning, they drove to the lake house. Richard had bought it online, sight unseen, trusting the photos. It was a risk, but he needed a clean break immediately. As they pulled up the gravel driveway, the sun was shining brightly. The house was nothing like the mansion. It was a log cabin style, made of warm timber and stone. It had a wraparound porch and big windows that faced a crystal-clear lake. Is this it? Lily asked, rubbing her eyes. This is it, Richard said. What do you think? Lily unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out. The air here was different, crisp, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. No car fumes. No marble polish smell. She walked up the steps, her boots crunching on the gravel. She touched the wooden railing. It was rough, textured, real. Richard unlocked the door. It swung open with a creak, a welcoming sound, not a scary one. Inside, the house was filled with light. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams. It was empty, but it felt full. Pick a room, Richard said. Any room you want. Lily ran up the wooden stairs. Her footsteps thumped deeply. A bass sound compared to the sharp click of the marble tiles. This one. She yelled from the top. Richard walked up. She had chosen a room with a slanted ceiling and a round window that looked like a ship's porthole, staring right out at the lake. Good choice, Richard smiled. This was going to be my office, but I think it makes a much better princess castle. Not a castle, Lily corrected him, serious. Castles have dungeons. This is a nest. Like for birds. A nest, Richard agreed. Safe and high up. That night, they camped in the living room in sleeping bags because the beds hadn't arrived yet. They ate pizza from a cardboard box, sitting on the floor in front of the stone fireplace. Daddy? Lily asked, chewing on a crust. Yeah, Munchkin. Is Marcella? Is she cold in jail? Richard stopped chewing. He looked at the fire. I suspect she is, honey. It's not a cozy place. Lily nodded, satisfied. Good. She hated the cold. It was a small moment of vindication. A tiny spark of the anger she needed to release. But the night wasn't easy. Around 2 a.m., Richard woke up to a scream. He scrambled out of his sleeping bag. Lily, I'm here. She was thrashing in her sleep, fighting invisible hands. No, don't. I'll clean it. I promise. Richard gathered her in his arms, rocking her back and forth. She was soaked in sweat. You're in the nest. You're in the nest. Look at the fire. Look at the fire. She woke up gasping, her eyes wild. It took her a full minute to recognize him. She found me, Lily whispered. She had a key. She has no keys, Richard said firmly. I threw the key in the dirt. Remember, and this house? This house has magic locks. Monsters can't see it. Magic? Yes, it's invisible to mean people. Lily rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. It took an hour for her to fall back asleep. Richard stayed awake until dawn, feeding logs into the fire, keeping the light alive. Healing isn't a straight line. It's messy. Nightmares, flashbacks, they're the aftershocks of the earthquake. If you are supporting someone through trauma, patience is your superpower. Richard is doing a great job being her anchor. Drop a in the comments to give Richard strength for the sleepless nights ahead. The first week at the lake house was a comedy of errors disguised as a tragedy. Richard woke up at 6 a.m. out of habit. He reached for his phone to check the Asian markets, but then remembered. He was on indefinite leave. There were no markets. Just the sunrise reflecting off the icy lake. He went downstairs to the kitchen. It was a rustic space with copper pots hanging from the ceiling, pots he had no idea how to use. Okay, Richard muttered to himself, rolling up the sleeves of his flannel shirt, a strange sensation after years of silk cuffs. Breakfast, eggs, toast. How hard can it be? It turns out very hard. He cracked an egg. Shells fell into the pan. He tried to fish them out, burning his finger. He put bread in the toaster, but set the dial too high. 5 minutes later, the kitchen was filled with smoke. Damn it! Richard coughed, waving a towel frantically at the smoke detector before it could shriek and wake Lily. He opened the window, letting the freezing Vermont air rush in. When the smoke cleared, he turned around to see Lily standing in the doorway. She was wearing oversized wool socks and clutching her bear. She looked at the blackened toast. She looked at the rubbery eggs. She looked at her father, who had flour on his nose for some reason. Richard froze. I ruined breakfast. I'm sorry. I can order. Wait, there's no Uber Eats here. Lily stared at him. The old Lily would have been terrified that a mistake meant punishment. But this Lily just tilted her head. A small sound escaped her lips. A hiccup? No. A giggle. It was rusty and quiet, but it was there. You look like a snowman, Daddy. Richard touched his nose, seeing the white flour on his finger. He grinned. Well, Snowman Daddy proposes we eat cereal for breakfast. Deal? Deal, Lily said, climbing onto a stool. They sat eating Cheerios in silence, but for the first time the silence wasn't empty. It was filled with the shared secret of a culinary disaster. We often think we need to be perfect parents or partners, but sometimes our failures bring us closer than our successes. Have you ever had a kitchen disaster that turned into a funny memory? Tell me your worst cooking fail below. I bet you can't beat Richard's burnt water. Routine. The book said children needed routine. So, Richard built one. 8 a.m. Breakfast, usually cereal or fruit, until Richard mastered pancakes. 9 a.m. Homeschool, which was mostly reading books by the fire. 下午12点, lunch sandwiches. 2 p.m. The walk became their sanctuary. They would bundle up in coats, Lily in a new bright yellow puffer jacket that Richard bought because yellow is the color of the sun, and walk down to the lake's edge. On the third day, the lake was frozen solid near the banks. Richard picked up a flat stone. Watch this, he said. He skimmed it across the ice. Chink, chink, slide. The sound was musical. Lily watched, mesmerized. She picked up a stone. She didn't throw it. She just held it, feeling its weight. It's heavy, she whispered. Like a bad memory, Richard said, improvising. You know what we do with heavy things we don't want to carry? Lily looked up. We throw them away. He motioned to the vast white lake. Lily looked at the stone. She squeezed it tight. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, she hurled it. It didn't skip. It landed with a dull thud in a snowbank. Good riddance, Richard said seriously. Good riddance, Lily repeated. She picked up another stone. This one is the closet. Thud. This one is the red dress. Thud. This one is when she made me hungry. Thud. They spent an hour there, throwing stones at invisible monsters until Lily's arm was tired and her cheeks were flushed pink with life. Nature has a way of healing us that medicine sometimes can't. There is something about the water and the open sky that absorbs our pain. Do you have a happy place in nature where you go to reset? Describe it to me in the comments. I'd love to visualize it. But healing wasn't just throwing stones. It was also facing the demons inside. Richard found Dr. Aris, a child psychologist in the nearby town. Her office wasn't clinical. It was a converted barn filled with beanbag chairs, art supplies, and a golden retriever named Barnaby. Richard sat in the waiting room, listening to the hum of conversation from inside. He felt anxious. What if the damage was permanent? What if he was too late? After the session, Dr. Aris called him in. "She's resilient, Richard," the doctor said, patting Barnaby's head. "But she has internalized a lot of guilt. She thinks her existence is a burden. You need to show her, not just tell her, that she is essential." "How?" Richard asked, desperate. "I buy her things. I cook for her." "Not things," Dr. Aris said. "Purpose. Give her a job. Something that only she can do. Make her a partner in this new life, not just a guest." On the drive home, Richard stopped at a garden center. "What are we doing?" Lily asked. "We need a garden," Richard said. "But I don't know the difference between a weed and a rose. I need a head gardener." He bought seeds, soil, and small pots. He bought a watering can that looked like an elephant. When they got home, they set up a station on the sun porch. Richard let Lily choose the seeds. Daisies, she decided. Because they look happy. Daisies it is. He watched her fill the pots with dirt. Her hands, which used to tremble when they held a cleaning rag, were now steady and careful. She planted the seeds like they were precious jewels. "Now," Richard said, "this is your department. If these guys die, it's on you, boss." Lily's eyes widened. "On me?" "Yep, you have to check them every day. Talk to them. Water them. Think you can handle it?" Lily stood up straighter. "Yes, I can handle it." It was a small responsibility, but for a girl who had been stripped of all agency, it was a crown. Weeks turned into a month. The snow began to melt. The daisies sprouted tiny green shoots of hope. But with spring came a new terror. School. Richard had enrolled her in Northwood Elementary, a small school nestled in the woods. But the night before the first day, the nightmares returned. Lily sat at the dinner table, pushing her pasta around. "I don't want to go," she whispered. "It's not like Cedar, Lily," Richard said gently. "I met the principal. She wears hiking boots to work. What if—" Lily's voice hitched. "What if the teacher is mean? What if I spill water? What if they lock me in?" Richard put down his fork. He realized that logic wouldn't work against trauma. He needed magic. He went to the hallway closet and pulled out a small silver pin. It was a lapel pin from his old company, a simple silver shield logo. He came back and pinned it onto Lily's backpack. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Lily shook her head. "This is a dad sensor. It's connected directly to my brain. If anyone, and I mean anyone, is mean to you or makes you feel scared, this pin gets hot. And I will know. And I will be there in 3 minutes. Faster than Superman." Lily touched the cold metal. "Really? Really? You are never alone in that room, Lily. I am right there with you." Inside the pin. She fingered the silver shield. She took a deep breath. 3 minutes. 2 if I run red lights. Richard winked. She smiled weakly. It wasn't a cure, but it was a crutch, and right now, she needed one. Kids have such magical thinking. Sometimes we have to enter their world to help them feel safe. That invisible string between parent and child is real. Have you ever given a child a lucky charm or a special object to help them be brave? Tell me about it. The morning of the first day, the air was crisp. Richard drove Lily to Northwood Elementary. It was nothing like the fortress-like Cedar School. This looked more like a lodge. There were no gates. Children were running on the grass. A dog was sleeping on the porch. Richard parked the car. He felt his own heart racing. He wanted to lock the doors and drive her back to the safety of the nest. What if I'm sending her back to the wolves? He looked at Lily. She was gripping her backpack straps, her thumb rubbing the silver pin. "Ready, head gardener?" Richard asked. Lily looked at the school, then at her dad. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Richard promised. She opened the door. She took a step. Then another. A woman walked out to greet the buses. She was older, with messy gray hair and a bright knitted scarf that looked like a rainbow explosion. This was Mrs. Gable. She spotted Lily. She didn't rush over. She didn't fake a smile. She just waved casually. "Morning. Watch out for the mud puddle on the left, it's a deep one." Lily paused. She looked at the puddle. She sidestepped it. Mrs. Gable gave her a thumbs up. "Nice moves." Lily looked back at the car. Richard rolled down the window and gave her a thumbs up too. She took a deep breath, adjusted her backpack, and walked towards the rainbow scarf. Richard watched until she disappeared inside the wooden doors. He didn't drive away immediately. He sat there for an hour, just watching the door, waiting for the pin to get hot. It didn't dot at 3 p.m. When he returned, Lily ran out. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't crying. She had paint on her cheek. "Blue paint. How was it?" Richard asked, his breath held. "Mrs. Gable let me paint," Lily said, climbing into the car. "I spilled the water jar." Richard froze. And she said, "Oops, now the floor is thirsty," and we wiped it up with paper towels. She didn't yell. Richard let out a breath that felt like it had been held for months. "The floor was thirsty," he repeated, laughing. A real deep belly laugh. "That's a good one." The floor was thirsty. Imagine a world where mistakes are met with humor instead of anger. That is the childhood every kid deserves. If hearing that reaction made you smile, hit that like button. Let's spread some of Mrs. Gable's energy today. A few weeks later, the snow had completely melted, revealing the lush, vibrant green of the Vermont spring. The air was filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. Richard was sitting on the porch. A laptop balanced on his knees, but he wasn't looking at the screen. He was watching Lily. She was sitting at the wooden picnic table in the yard, her tongue poking out of the corner of her mouth in deep concentration. She had a box of 64 crayons, the big box with the sharpener in the back, scattered. Around her. She had been drawing for an hour. "Done," she announced suddenly, holding up a sheet of paper. Richard closed his laptop. "Let's see it, Picasso." Lily ran up the porch steps, her boots thumping happily. She handed him the drawing. It wasn't like the dark, scratchy scribbles he had found in her notebook months ago. There were no black clouds. No crying stick figures. The drawing showed a large, brown house. But the most prominent feature was the door. It was drawn huge, taking up almost half the house, and it was painted a bright, welcoming yellow. Through the open door, you could see a blue sky and a shining sun. "Tell me about this," Richard asked softly, tracing the yellow lines. "It's our house," Lily explained, pointing. "And that's the door. I drew it wide open. Why is it so big?" Lily looked at him, her blue eyes clear and devoid of the shadows that used to haunt them. "So the light can get in. And so, if I get scared, I can run out. And if you get lost, you can run in." Richard felt a lump form in his throat. It was such a simple, profound statement. After years of living in a fortress designed to keep people out, she had drawn a home designed to let love in. "It's a masterpiece," Richard whispered. "It's the best thing I've ever seen." This is the breakthrough moment. Art allows children to speak when words fail them. Lily drawing an open door, instead of a locked closet, symbolizes her total liberation. If this beautiful metaphor touched your heart, please share this video with someone you love. Let's remind the world that doors can be opened again. "We need to hang this," Richard declared, "in the most important spot in the house." Lily followed him inside. In the old mansion, the walls were adorned with abstract art that cost more than a car, chosen by interior designers to impress guests. Here, the walls were pine, warm and golden. Richard walked to the living room, right above the stone fireplace mantel, the focal point of the room. "Here?" he asked. "But isn't that for a fancy mirror?" Lily asked, parroting something Marcella might have said. "Nope." Richard grabbed a hammer and a nail. "This spot is reserved for the open door. Nothing is fancier than that." He hammered the nail in. He didn't use a measuring tape. He didn't care if it was perfectly centered. He hung the drawing, securing it with 2 pieces of tape so it wouldn't curl. They stepped back to admire it. The drawing looked small against the large stone chimney, but it commanded the room. "It's perfect," Lily beamed out just then. Richard's phone buzzed on the coffee table. He glanced at the screen. It was his lawyer. Robert. Richard picked it up and walked to the kitchen window. "Hello?" "It's done, Richard." Robert's voice was tinny on the line. The jury returned the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Fraud, embezzlement, child endangerment. She's looking at 15 years, minimum. Diaz got 10. Richard looked out at the lake. He expected to feel triumphant. He expected to feel a surge of victory. But he just felt light. A heavy dark coat he hadn't realized he was still wearing simply slipped off his shoulders. "Thank you, Robert," Richard said quietly. "It's over." "It's over," Robert confirmed. "Go be a dad." Richard hung up. He didn't tell Lily the details. She didn't need to know about courtrooms and sentences. She just needed to know she was safe. He walked back into the living room. Lily was still staring at her drawing. "Who was that?" she asked. "Just someone telling me some good news," Richard said. "The bad weather is gone, Lily. For good." Time moved differently at the lake. It didn't march in hours and minutes. It flowed in seasons. Spring turned to summer. The yellow puffer jacket was replaced by t-shirts and shorts. The daisies in the pots bloomed into cheerful white stars. Richard learned to cook pancakes without burning them, mostly. He learned that Lily loved strawberry ice cream but hated chocolate. He learned that she snored softly when she was really tired. One evening in late August, the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold colors that no longer felt like a bruise, but like a royal painting. They were sitting on the dock, their feet dangling just above the water. "Daddy?" Lily asked, swinging her legs. "Yeah, Lil. Do you miss your old work? The big office?" Richard looked at the water. He thought about the boardrooms, the stress, the empty applause of strangers. Then he looked at his daughter, whose skin was sun-kissed and whose knees were scraped from climbing trees. "Not for a second," he said honestly. "My new job is much better." "What's your new job?" "I'm the guardian of the nest." Richard smiled, bumping her shoulder with his. "And the chief pancake maker." Lily giggled. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You're a good pancake maker, even if they are sometimes crunchy." They sat there as the sun dipped below the horizon. The first stars began to twinkle, reflecting in the stillness of the lake. "Daddy," Lily whispered, her voice sleepy. "The door in the drawing." "Yeah? I think we don't need the door anymore." Richard looked down at her. "Why not?" "Because we're already outside," she murmured, closing her eyes. "We're free." Richard kissed the top of her head. "Yes, baby. We are free." He held her as the night settled in, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, steady and calm. The ghosts were gone. The silence was no longer empty. It was full of peace. And for Richard Sterling, the man who had lost everything to find what mattered, it was the richest moment of his life. And that is the story of Richard and Lily. From the cold marble floors of a house without love, to the warm wooden porch of a home filled with light. It's a reminder that it is never too late to start over. It is never too late to listen. And it is never too late to open the door and let the sun in. What city are you watching this video from and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. I want to hear from you one last time. Which moment in this story healed a part of your heart? Was it when Richard stood up in the gala? Or when Lily finally threw the stone into the lake? Leave a comment below. Let's build a community here that believes in second chances. I'm Richard, narrator's persona, and I'll see you in the next story. Sleep well, and remember, the door is always open.